Brent, our director of high school ministry, is planning and leading a trip to Rainbow Trail Lutheran Camp in Colorado, where our high schoolers will backpack in the Rocky Mountains, the most mountaintop on top of an actual mountaintop experience you can get. And I'm a huge advocate for this trip because when I first started out in my ministry, I planned and led this same trip with the high school youth group that I was the director of. So to me, this was the perfect trip. I love Colorado. I love hiking. I love the mountains. And I've always wanted to backpack and camp in the mountains. So when I found out that you can combine all of those things that I loved and wanted to do for a trip with youth ministry, I hopped on board and signed us up. But the church that I was at had only ever done mission trips up until this point, where they did a lot of service work. So I had to pitch and make my case very, very appealing so that I could lead a trip like this. And I ended up winning. So this group went with me, all right? So myself and a group full of boys and one other adult leader, we set off west to Colorado. There was a lot of nerves in this group. Some worried about how long we would be hiking each day. Some worried about that they weren't physically fit enough for a trip like this. Some worried about where we would go to the bathroom, where we would eat, what we would eat, if we would be hungry. Would bears mess with us on top of this mountain? And so we went in all these different directions of our expectations and ideas of what was going to happen. And once we arrived in Colorado, we were at the main camp for one night before we set out on trail. And so that night before, we packed our packs, stuffing them with the most important essentials that we were going to need on this trail. And one of those items I asked if I should bring, they were hefty, by the way, were these little faith talk cards. And I used them as icebreakers to get the kids talking. And they would include, like, what's your favorite TV show, right? What type of music do you like to listen to? And then there'd be some real kickers. Have you ever thought about your own death? What do you think about your baptism? Do you think about your baptism? So they ranged from depth. And one of the seniors, when I asked if I should bring these, said, I hate those stupid cards. So I secretly packed them in my pack, and we set off on trail, and everyone was having a good time until that altitude kicked in. And people started breathing a little bit heavier, which made the talking less and less as people focused on what we were doing and what we were trying to accomplish. And we were walking out of our nerves. After a couple of days, though, when we were on trail, there was a bit of a lull in the conversation during this campfire. And that senior boy who hated those faith talk cards asked if I ended up bringing them because we should really use them. And so I smiled a smile that made him know I told you so. And I happily ran to my pack and I got out those faith talk cards. And they had to open them and they couldn't flip. It was just the first card that they could read was the one that we had to do. And because of those faith talk cards, we got deeper into conversation and we got deeper into a youth group than we had ever been before. While on trail, we were changed, both individually, but more importantly, as a group. We found that we needed to work together in our hiking cadence. Sometimes we needed to carry someone else's pack that may have been heavier than our own. We leaned on each other in conversation. We had no choice but to dive deeper into relationship and conversation with one another because there was nobody else around us. And there was also just something about the night after experiencing a thunderstorm in the mountains. When you feel that earth shake and rumble beneath your sleeping bag and tent, and then you come out in the sun of the morning, and everybody says, "Did you feel that? That was crazy." It was that communal aspect that changed us. We didn't want to leave. Well, I wanted to leave only to shower, but then I wanted to go right back out there, I promise. But we were different when we hiked back out of those mountains. Us as a group would never go back to the way we were before. We walked into this holy fear of having our world changed by truly seeing each other on trail. And our group dynamics were different than they used to be. We changed in ways that we didn't expect. Our youth group was solid. We leaned on each other when we wanted to rest. We didn't expect anything special to happen on trail for sure, mostly just hoping that our own motivation and expectation and determination would get us through this backpacking experience without someone wanting to turn back about a mile in. And when we arrived back at Rainbow Trail, everything was as if we had never left. Everything was the same except for us. And in our gospel, after the disciples fall to the ground in holy fear, Jesus taps them on their shoulders, telling them to get up and not be afraid. He was alone. He wasn't glowing anymore. There was no voice from the clouds anymore. Everything went back to the way that it was before the transfiguration. Everything except the disciples. They could not go back down the mountain, returning as if nothing had ever happened. The world was not the same for them, even though it looked the same. They had been changed. And even though we are changed from big experiences, big God encounters through our mountaintop experiences, we don't stay on the mountain. Jesus only revealed to them what he already had been telling the disciples who he was. He was the Son of God in the valley all along. The mountaintop didn't change that. He just showed that part of his identity in a new way to make them get it. So perhaps our transfiguration might be about learning to see ordinary things in extraordinary ways. So what would it mean to live and feel the realm of God where Jesus is shining bright all around us in our everyday lives? Because we do live in the realm of God.